So Jane, listen, I am excited to talk to you today. And I think, in my opinion, death, not just my opinion, but for millions of people, almost everybody, death is one of the scariest topics we can talk about, right? And so getting real and kind of getting to the truth of what's really going on, I think having a perspective, a healthy perspective on death, a perspective that is aligned with reality and not fantasy, I think that can only help a lot of people. So I'm so happy to talk to you. You are a death doula. Why don't we start off with explaining what that is for our audience and maybe any misconceptions people might have about what you do?
Wow, I would love enough people to have some idea of what I do to actually have a misconception. that would be really awesome. Doula is a Greek word, and it means like helper or servant. And for me, and for death doulas, it means entering people's lives around this issue of death and supporting them in a way emotionally and sometimes physically. Not all doulas give physical support. I do, and spiritually. And I think it's really necessary because, like you said, we don't think about it ahead of time. We don't incorporate feelings of death into how we live our lives. So a lot of times you've been in denial your whole life, and then this thing happens and we're ill-equipped to deal with it. And that's why a doula, someone who has experience around this issue, who has some ideas or offerings about how you can personalize it, how it can reflect the values that you have lived your life with, and actually become this really rich, amazing culmination of your life. And I'm not saying it's not hard, but much like birth, it's this fundamental experience to who we are as people, and why not embrace it and have a curiosity about it? So that's what doulas do. They sort of open that door for people, or sometimes they put their foot in the door before it gets slammed shut to be like, just maybe consider this other way to look at it.
Yeah, I'm 48, and I think most people go through their life, like intellectually, they realize death is going to happen at some point. But I think, myself included, maybe until you reach a certain age or a certain point of your life, you're really not in touch with, I think you called it somewhere else, like the super finite fact of your life. Like this life is really going to end at a very specific time, and we don't know when. And so let's not live our lives as if we're going to live forever. I think when I was younger, it really you kind of feel like you are going to live forever, even though intellectually you know you're not. But I think really coming to grips with the fact that this thing is going to end, okay, knowing that it's going to end, how would I live my life knowing that this is going to end? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I was just like you until my husband was diagnosed, and then you have this. It's like a snow globe moment where all the fake fluff settles to the ground, and you can see things so clearly. And for me, and I think a lot of people in that situation, your values change pretty dramatically overnight. And I work really hard to keep hold of those values, by having a daily death practice or these ways to incorporate thinking that life is short every day. And that's really what it takes to shift your focus, because we live in this society that wants to encourage us every imaginable way that you are never going to die. I mean, I go crazy when I hear those radio shows about successful aging, which is like, doing memory things and doing exercise and basically doing everything you can to hold on to your youth, instead of like, what is aging? Like, what is the deterioration of our bodies and the loss of these capacities that our ability, our jobs, our stature in society, these things that come to mean who we are that really aren't really who we are at all.
Yeah.
There's this it's like It's of course like a Zen Buddhist story about the salt doll. Have you ever heard that?
Salt doll. I don't think so.
It's really great. There's a salt doll that is walking through the desert for, years, comes to the sea, has never seen the sea, does not know what it is. So it's standing there and it says to the sea, "What are you?" And the sea says, "Come in and find out." And so the salt doll starts wading into the sea, and little by little is dissolving and dissolving and dissolving until it's just a whisper of its original self. And then the salt doll says, "Aha, now I know what I am." Like that.
Wow.
I think holding death close to you keeps you always trying to focus on what is the essence of yourself as a human, as this magical creature. Like, life is a mystery, right? We are creatures of mystery, and we spend so much time trying to rationalize the mystery and the curiosity out of life.
I want to hear some more about your death practices. That's very interesting.
So there's a lot of different ways, and I really encourage people to come up with their own personal way that makes sense for them. I have an altar in my house with flowers and sacred objects, and I visit it every morning and just remind myself, like the Buddhists start every day with, "I am of the nature to grow old. I am of the nature to suffer. I am of the nature to die." This is my core nature, is not durable, and so just spend some time thinking about that. My brother has obituaries of in the course of his lifetime on the inside of his closet. So that's how he gets dressed every morning. He opens that closet and looks at all the people who don't get to be here. And for him, it has been profound. I have, other people, when you are out in nature, you're just really aware of things that are dying. Nature is our best teacher and our best kind of solace around the temporary nature of our existence, because it's in nature all the time. So it's really easy to look at a flower. There's a woman who does this, talks about, how many time-lapse videos of a flower blooming you have seen in your lifetime, and how 99.9 stop at full bloom. You never get the time lapse does not go through the death of that flower and the flowers return to the earth. I mean, imagine if that's what we saw, if our culture reflected that to us. It would be so much easier to be present with that. But we are encouraged not to look at it.
Right. I imagine watching a time-lapse video of a flower blooming and then disintegrating again. That in itself could be a cool death practice.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I have the intention at my house to set up a little shrine and have pictures of all the family members who are no longer with us, and have little candles in front of those pictures. I know a lot of families do that, and a lot of families don't,
Or an ancestor plate at family meals, where you set a place for all the people who can no longer be here. And maybe you put mementos of theirs around, or you put their favorite foods on it, or it's this physical presence at the gathering to remind everybody that the gathering they're having right now, this Christmas, this Hanukkah, whatever, is temporary. It's going to change.
I actually really like that. So set a place for a family member who's no longer there, and maybe put their picture or whatever. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I really
in certain Native American traditions, they put food out. So you serve up food on that plate, and everybody's eating. And then at the end of the meal, you take the plate out to someplace out in nature and put it at the base of a tree, or at the base of, whatever, for animals to come eat. It's like spirit food.
Right. Hey, where did you get those affirmations, those Buddhist affirmations about, I'm made to grow old, I'm made to die, those things? Is there a particular Buddhist teaching that you got those affirmations from? Because I think they're wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's like Buddhism 101. You'll find them everywhere. I, in particular, I love Joan Halifax. She wrote a book called Being with Dying. And she has meditations for you to do. It's basically like a course in becoming comfortable with your own death. She's really amazing, as is Frank Ostaseski. He wrote a book called The 5 Invitations, and it's the 5 invitations that death offers to change the way we live our lives.
Interesting. Have you studied much of the Buddhist bardos?
You know, a little. I'm total armchair Buddhist. I have Lincoln in the Bardos on my audiobook, but I'm behind on it. And, you know, I did the whole Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Right.
When I say did it, I watched a video of a Buddhist monk who died in Nepal. And basically they filmed the monks coming in for 49 days, reading things to the deceased. And that was, I mean, a lot of it is that the soul's journey is fraught with pitfalls. And so you need to be read to every day after you die to be educated about what decisions your soul should make to get your best reincarnation. For example, they say don't go to the light. That going to the light that's a trap. That's a lower incarnation. You want to avoid the light. So it's just fascinating.
Wow. And so they left the body there for 49 days?
Yeah. Like, you know, they're high up in the mountains, so it's dry and cold and all the windows are open and yeah.
Yeah. My whole question with that is like, how in the hell would anyone know what happens after you go to the light or don't go to the light? But that's probably a conversation for another day.
Well, that's what I really encourage people to have a curiosity about it. You know, that's another thing that hamstrings you at the end. If you have not spent your life thinking about like, what does happen to me? And just even, it's okay if you don't know what happens to you, but having given it some thought, you know, I'm with people in hospice a lot and they can have a really rock solid spiritual, you know, Roman Catholic tradition, and they can still be very scared of what happens to them because they haven't, you know, they've kind of digested what has been told to them through the church, but they haven't really owned it. And conversely, there's people with no spiritual tradition who are pretty confident and comfortable with not knowing what happens and being like, well, maybe this will happen or maybe this will happen, or, you know. So I always wish that for people, because you can't export it and you can't really create it in the last 10 days of your life. It has to be more of a practice.
Any idea of what makes the difference in those people, let's say those non-religious people that are more comfortable with it? Have they just been thinking about it more, or anything you've noticed about that?
Yeah, I think it's that they have been thinking about it. They have been living a life that is more based in the now than feeling like future tripping, for lack of a better word. And I caution myself all the time to not get on a soapbox about how people live their lives. But there is the people who face death with an openness and a softness. I am guessing that they have been facing life with an openness and a softness. Like that is just who they are. But, you know, and hospice nurses always say people die the way they live. So if you are rock hard in denial your whole life, then you can be in denial in death. You know, you can never admit to your friends and family that you're dying. You can never give them permission to admit that you're dying. So none of those conversations, those super rich conversations happen, which is heartbreaking for an end of life doula, because that's what we're all about.
Yeah, one of my best friends, his dad passed away recently, and he was basically in denial of death, you know, the whole time. And so I really don't know how many of those important conversations actually happened before he passed. And I know you've said that happens actually a lot, where people are fighting this thing instead of kind of reading the notes on the wall and taking action to to make sure that the experience of passing for themselves and for their family is a meaningful one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where you don't, where you don't leave your family members holding the bag, where they're not going to have to carry this burden of resentment. If you were supposed to apologize and you didn't, then they have to carry that. If they were insecure about how much you love them, they continue to carry that, when this is like your opportunity to let everybody take that weight and dissolve it and just like swim around in a pool of love, for a little while before you leave.
Yeah. Yeah. I read somewhere, I don't know where it was. It was something about a story where the person was dying. It was a man, and he had been estranged from his son, or they had a rocky relationship for years and years and years. And literally on his deathbed, like I think right before he died, he apologized to the son, and that allowed the son, after his dad passed, to have closure. And what an amazing gift that is for that person to give that to the son before they pass. I mean, all that suffering that's avoided by that happening. It's really beautiful.
Right. And it launches that son on a healthy road to be able to grieve. It's just so much easier to grieve when you're not all conflicted about stuff.
Yeah, we don't have resentment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
How many people have you assisted in the process of passing?
Well, that's a hard question, because I'm a doula, and I get paid for that, and that is a much smaller number than I'm a hospice volunteer at the hospice where my husband died twice a month, and so I see those people. 99% of them are not there 2 weeks later when I go. So I have these really deep, amazing connections, and then I don't see them again. So I don't know how to answer that. As a doula, probably 25.
Right.
And as a volunteer, hundreds.
So you were very special, because there's really not that much opportunity for people to talk to another human being who has experienced, 25 people going through the death process. It's rare. And I know you talk about it elsewhere, where it's like just a kind of exposure. Like it's a healthy thing to be able to have that experience of going through the process of someone dying, because if you don't, then what the hell, like you don't know what to expect, and probably you have more anxiety. And can you talk on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely you have more anxiety. That's one of my first questions. So I'm visiting these people in hospice. All of them have like 2 weeks or less for the most part. And one of the first questions I ask them when I feel like we have a rapport is, what is your experience with death? And I am absolutely shocked at the number of 80-year-olds who will say not very much. Like, I've never been with someone when they died, or I've been with one person when they died. Right. I don't know how it happens. I don't know what the stages are. I don't know, and it's conflicting. I think we are falling short in our own personal responsibility to not expose ourselves to more death. We all have family members, relatives who get a terminal diagnosis, and we all distance ourselves. So we see them less frequently. We are not there at the deathbed. And then that kind of puts hospice in a little bit of a bind, because then we show up at hospice and we have no experience. And frequently we don't want to know. I was with a man, and he was really angry. He was like 52, and he was really angry. And resentful that his chemo had given him these sores in his mouth, so he couldn't eat anymore. And he was like, that's all I can really appreciate. And we were talking about resentment, and he was telling me everything he was saying. He said, I resent you that you can get up and go out of this room. Like, I can't walk like that anymore. And I was thinking to myself, in 4 days, you're not going to be able to sit up. but he didn't know that. I mean, he didn't know that. And I said, do you want to know how this is going to go down? And he said, no. And I said, okay. And then like 2.5 minutes later, he said, yes, I did.
Right.
And it's just, what a disservice. That's another death practice I offer with a friend. We do a death meditation where we have people come in and they sit. I'm trying to think, I haven't done it in a while. They sit, they bring like 4 pictures of them throughout their lives, like maybe your first grade school picture, your high school graduation, some momentous relationship, whether it's with a person or an animal, and maybe a picture of someplace that's important to them. And we have them just like sit with all these, kind of do a life review, right? And then we have them lay down, and I slowly take them through this guided meditation of all the elements leaving your body. And that's a very Buddhist perspective. The Buddhists are like, the elements leave your body. So first, it's the earth element, which is the ability to support yourself, your muscle, your strength. You can no longer walk, you're bedbound. You can no longer move your arms. People hug you and you can't hug them back. Your bodily processes slow down. You can't eat anymore because your body can't digest. And then, it's like water, your tears dry up, your saliva dries up, you can't swallow. Fire is, you lose your ability to regulate temperature. You get fevers, you get cold, your extremities get really cold. Air, your breathing becomes very irregular. You can't sustain just a regular in and out, and eventually it ceases altogether. And I have them visualizing their breath as this continuous cord that is getting frayed, and then it breaks. And then I have them go on this journey, whatever they believe their spiritual journey is, I have them go there. And then we talk them through the dissolution of their body, whether it's through fire, again, air, like if they're going to have a sky burial, water, cremation, or buried in the earth, and your body gets carried away in the wind or gets absorbed into the earth, and you are no more. And within 100 years, everybody who knew you is no more. And how do you want to feel when you are lying there on your deathbed and you no longer, I have them look and see their keys and their wallet sitting next to them on the deathbed, and they mean nothing to them. Absolutely nothing. They have zero connection to these things that hold so much value in our regular lives. And really, if you live your life thinking, how do I want to feel do I want to feel at peace? How do I get there? How do I live a life that at the end I can be at peace?
Right, exactly. And then work your way backwards.
Yeah.
Right. What do I need to do so that when I arrive on my deathbed, I've said everything I've needed to say, I've apologized for everything I needed to apologize, and to whatever extent possible, I'm ready for this. I've got to let you know that when you were talking about the, losing the ability to move your arms, and then your tears dry up and digestion, all that, that's scary as shit. that scares me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
honest.
when you're with someone who takes their last bite of food, it is profound. It is, and it's very clear. When Rob, my husband, did it, he had a terrible look on his face, and I could tell he was just rolling around this food. And I know he was eating not because he was hungry, but because he somehow equated it with staying alive, which people frequently do. And I was like, spit that out, spit it out. But you're so much closer to death when you can no longer eat,
And I want to talk a little bit more about signs that the end is getting near, but I want to kind of turn a little positive at first. Can you share a story of an example of a beautiful passing, where something beautiful and meaningful happened with someone you were helping?
Yeah. So this is, frequently I work with people out of state or not in the metro. And so then I have a relationship with them where I basically am doulaing them, and they doula for their person, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I was with a young woman who was very intuitive and grounded, and I just knew she could do it. And she was like 35 and her husband was 35. And they had actually been planning their wedding when they found out he was sick. So it was really a tough one. But she would contact me and say, like, you know, oh my gosh, the mother-in-law is driving me crazy. She never leaves us alone. I want to be able to be with him by myself. These are the things that a doula can help with. You know, it's really, I always say death is exhausting and sacred and mundane all mixed up. So I would help her create a schedule so everybody could have their own time and with him and wouldn't get overwhelmed. And so that we were kind of troubleshooting all along. And then towards the end, he was in like kind of a recliner. Lots of people are in recliners just because when you have breathing issues, you really need to be sitting up. And if you don't have a hospital bed, a recliner is your next best bet. And she, you know, made this. We taught also another job for a doula is to create this space. You know, if you think of giving birth, we think really hard about water births or soft lighting or the music playlist, the atmosphere. And we don't think so much like that about death. So she lit candles all around the room and she put all his, he was a big outdoorsman. So all his outdoors, all the stuff he loved all around him. And I don't know, I'm sure she played some kind of music. And then she just crawled into the Barca lounger with him, you know, and she's like, I got in my pajamas and I just like put my forehead next to him. And she said, I just felt like we were communing without words. Like he couldn't really speak anymore, you know? So I think that's another thing. People do not snuggle up with their loved ones. I mean, I had a huge regret about that with Rob. I sat next to him and held his hand and, you know, stroked his face, but I am so mad that I didn't crawl into bed. You know, and that's something hospice is not going to tell you that. It's just, anyway. So she crawled into bed with him and he passed that way. They were together.
Wow.
They were alone. And then she called me because she wanted to do a body washing, which is, have you heard about body washing?
Just from your previous interviews.
Oh, okay. So we did a body washing with him and I don't do anything. I hold the space. So I, you know, make sure that the hospice nurse was there and she was, you know, taking all the ports out of him and cleaning him up. And
wait,
I just make
ports?
sure.
What are ports?
Oh, you know, where if you need a feeding tube or you need a catheter, then they like basically cut a hole in you and stick a tube in you. And frequently people at end of life, especially younger ones who are doing all kinds of treatments, will have more ports. Palliative care says they have a slogan called no holes without goals, because medical doctors see all kinds of possibilities for you. If you have a terminal illness, they'll be like, oh, we can do this, and then we can do this, and then we can do this. Whereas palliative care is all about comfort. And they're like, you know, having a bunch of holes in you is not comfortable. So they really want to make sure that there's a legitimate reason for putting that port in. Anyway, and then she did this absolutely beautiful body washing of him. And I think really that helped her. Actually, it's just the 1-year anniversary a couple of days ago. That helped her with her grieving process to be able to, after he was gone, to continue caring for him, to continue loving him, to spend as much time that she needed with him until she had told him everything and she was ready for that body to be gone. And that's another thing, we don't give ourselves permission to spend hours. You can spend days with, you could do a home vigil and have the body at home with minimal, just cooling the torso with ice packs that you change every few hours and have a window open. And it is very doable, very healing for all friends and family. So good to expose children to what a dead body is. I think it's really, that is the key to changing our death phobic culture.
Okay. So first question is, how did she know that was the time to crawl into the recliner with him?
Well, she could have done it multiple times.
Okay, right.
The other thing is everybody's like hung up on goodbye. Like when should we say goodbye? I'm like, say goodbye every day, because basically goodbye is the thank you, I'm sorry, I love you conversation. And you really can't say that enough. You know, it doesn't have to be morbid. It doesn't have to be like, well, you know, this is it. You won't be here tomorrow. You know, it can be a different way. And that's the same with the snuggling. I think she was intuitive enough that, and with a strong enough background of what the stages of death look like, you get a pretty good sense of when it's going to happen. I mean, there's always people who we all think are going to die within 6 hours, and they are alive 4 days later. So that's why no hospice nurse will ever really predict. They'll say, you know, likely it will happen at this time. But I always tell people, don't wait.
Don't wait to say those important things.
Don't wait for anything.
Yeah. So I just had this visual of that woman washing the body afterwards. And like everyone listening, if you imagine actually someone you love passing and then washing the body after they've passed, I don't think most people have, even though that's even possible, number one. And number two, I mean, that is heavy and also beautiful. And I can just imagine if the body is there, even for multiple days, in a state where you can come back and have more conversations with the person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It is. I think I've never, ever heard of anyone who's like the body washing was uncomfortable, or, you know, all the discomfort happens in your head as you're driving over to the house where you're going to do it. But as soon as you are in that house and you are holding that person's hand, there is a change.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a practical question. Is there always poop involved after someone passes?
Did you say, is there always poop involved?
Yep.
Well, you know, not after they pass. I would say in most cases, it's like labor, where your body is getting ready to do this profound thing. So it is eliminating everything. So there is a day on your journey where there is a lot of poop. And it's just like you are eliminating. And then people aren't eating. So then you're pretty much, that's over. I mean, occasionally, sometimes, I was worried about that with Rob actually, but didn't happen. And frequently when someone's bedbound, they'll put in a catheter. So you don't have to worry about pee either.
Right. So there's a question that you've addressed before in a different interview that I listened to. And so there's really no clear answer to this. Maybe we could just touch upon this for a second, which is the whole idea of when to fight a diagnosis and when to accept. Obviously every single situation is different. I'm sure you've got tons of stories of people making a mistake in one direction, which is fighting rather than, at a certain point accepting and then taking the appropriate action.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, my big piece of wisdom around this is that when I get a terminal diagnosis, I will be having a meeting with my medical doctor about what the treatment options are. And I will be having a meeting with my palliative care doctor about what the comfort measures are. And I will go on that journey, bouncing back and forth between what those people are saying. I will not hand the keys to the end of my life over to my medical doctor. I will not trust them more than I trust my own internal compass. I think we are on the side of saying, like, the doctor says, and then that's somehow definitive and that you don't have a role in it. So I always, I get calls from the hospital with people who are really lost in that maze. And my sole job is to get them in touch with their own internal compass, and with the internal compass of their loved one who is dying, about what do they want? What do they want? Because, and also, what is sometimes I feel like medical doctors don't really give you the long game. They give you the next step. So you're constantly doing this next step, but you don't know what's on the other side of the curtain. And then you get up there and you've got another next step, and there's never, when are we done? You know, when you have to know where to draw the line, because a medical doctor will never, ever draw the line for you. And worst case scenario is you end up dying in a hospital without having said goodbye or done the mending of relationships that is called on, because being tired, being sick, will sneak up on you. And all of a sudden you will be dying, and you will not you don't have the energy, you don't have the clarity of mind, you're on very powerful drugs, and you've missed the window. So people can fight right up to the end, but please take time to do the groundwork. So if something goes wildly wrong and you are on your deathbed, there's not something that you're saying, I wish I would have done it. Like, this is too soon. You know, don't be in denial about the fact that your life is in the balance.
That's a really good point about the death or the sickness or the bad feelings can sneak up on you. So, you know, take those actions early. Do you ever have people write letters to their loved ones that they can read after, you know, they've passed, to make sure the loved ones know how much they love them and how much they meant to them?
I encourage people to do that a lot. And I made Rob write letters to our boys, and he said it was the hardest thing he ever did. He just struggled, and he was like an English major, so words were not hard for him. But writing those letters was really hard, but you know, it's their prized possession. And actually, he didn't write. I said, you don't have to write one for me, because I could see how hard it was. And then he didn't. And I was like, why didn't I make him write me one? But you know, he was a very prolific letter writer to me. So I have a gazillion letters, so that's okay. But yeah, I think letters is really good for the person who is going to be bereaved, to have this message in your handwriting to them. I think it's really great for people to write their own eulogies, top 10 things I learned about life, to be read at their memorial or their funeral. I think that goes a long way with healing people's grief.
Yeah. I've recorded what I call legacy videos made to both of my kids about how much I love them, any lessons I want them to learn from my life, you know, mistakes I've made or things I've done well, and to kind of pass that on for them.
Yeah, go ahead. So does that give you solace, knowing like if you got hit by a bus, like you have this thing?
Exactly. Yes.
See, I think that's what people don't realize. Is that like you have this like ace in the hole because you're done. You know, that gives you peace.
Right. Exactly. If you think about it, I mean, if something were to happen to you randomly, knock on wood, out of the blue, if your loved ones have these videos, how priceless are those videos compared to if they don't have those videos? You know, I would love to have those videos of family members that are no longer here that I could watch and learn a little bit about their life and how they felt about things. So let me ask you this. It seems like there's definitely a downside toward fighting the diagnosis too long. Have you ever seen a downside of accepting the diagnosis too early?
Like where people like gave up.
And does giving up even, have you witnessed that giving up makes a difference? Fighting makes a difference, or?
You know, it is a mystery that I don't feel comfortable commenting on. I mean, you know, I've had a good family friend had the same kind of kidney cancer. Well, no, it wasn't the same kind, but he battled kidney cancer for 10 years. And I don't think I could do that. I don't think it's in me. I don't want to do that. So the, mm, I haven't. I mean, no, I haven't seen anyone where I felt like my father-in-law was 77 and he did one round of chemo and he said, I'm done. He said, my train is coming into the station.
Right.
Like, that's it. Which I think is got to feel empowering. You know, like you're basically choosing this.
Right.
Right.
So, you know, and also the truth that nobody knows is that when people go on to hospice, they live longer. So you take two people who are in the same straits, one continues treatment, and this is towards the end. So maybe you're given 4 months to live. The person who discontinues treatment and goes into hospice, in general, tends to live longer with a better quality of life for longer, because it gives your body a chance to recover from the chemo or whatever it is. And you have this resurgence of feeling healthy, and you get to go on some last trip. And there's definitely, I see that frequently.
Interesting. Have you ever seen people get better where you thought they were going to die? Everybody thought they were going to die, and all of a sudden they get better.
Yeah.
Because when I get involved, it's pretty far down the line. I have seen people, it's frequent for people to rally where they are in a steady decline, and then they have 4 hours or 24 hours or maybe even 30 hours where they basically return to their old selves. You know, their appetite comes back and they have this energy, and people make the mistake of thinking, oh, we're going to go back to normal. Like, she's getting better, instead of like, wow, what a gift this is. How can we use this? How can we just soak in the goodness of having our person back for a day?
Right. You know, they say a lot of people that have near-death experiences come away with a greater appreciation for life. Do you feel like people either in your situation where you witness a lot of death, or other people who have also witnessed a lot of death, do you think that typically there's a pattern there where you do get a greater appreciation of life by seeing the end of it, multiple times?
Yes. You know, people say, oh, working in hospice, it must be so depressing, or, oh my gosh, you're so amazing that you can work in hospice. But really, it is such a gift to me to be with these people at the end and having, these intense experiences with their friends and family, and also for me, and just the mundane of being thankful that I can walk places, or that I can eat delicious pad thai, or the simple things that just keeps such a laser focus on the amazing, beautiful things that are within my grasp to do every single day. And so I think, yes, people who are around end of life, other folks, have a gratitude in their daily lives that because of their work.
Any ideas come to mind as far as what a normal person who's not a doula can do to get more exposure to death? I know you've said before, like, look for death in nature and things like that. Anything else as far as coming into contact with it more?
Well, you can, volunteering with hospice is the greatest job ever. You can have one person that you meet with 4 hours a month, and you can read to them, and you can hear all about their life stories, and you can accompany them basically for the end of their lives. And it is, there's no word for it, how great it is to connect with another human on this really intimate level. And they will share with you things about their journey that sometimes they don't share with their own family, because sometimes it's hard for their family to talk about it with them. So you are this person for them that helps them process what's going on with them. And you as a volunteer, you get to have that experience vicariously, and it will change the way you think about death. It will change the way you think about life.
Wow. And so let me ask, so the person who's in hospice, why do they want a volunteer, someone they don't know, to come in and help them?
Because I always say 8 out of 10 people want to die at home, and 8 out of 10 caregivers are wildly unprepared for what that means. So your husband is dying at home. You are the sole caregiver. Hospice is there 5% of the time. So maybe you get a nurse visit once a week or twice a week, or maybe 3 times on the last week. Maybe you see a doctor. Maybe you have a music therapist come once a week. Otherwise, it is all on you, keeping track of all those meds, watching your person decline, having to be the support person for your person, but also kind of losing that you've just, as a caregiver, you've just lost the person that you talk to about everything. Because I can't talk to Rob about how, I mean, I can in some ways about like my grief about the fact that he's sick, but I can't do that. I can't push that all on him, So caregivers, it's an exhausting job. They need respite. They need someone to come be with their person for a couple hours so they can go to the gym. They can go to the grocery store, just like super mundane stuff.
Right.
So you're volunteering to go into someone's house where hospice is going on. Got it.
And lots of times these people are up,
Right.
The caregivers up all night long because there's meds that you have to give every 4 hours or every 6 hours or every 8 hours, or nighttime is really hard for people who are facing end of life. I mean, nighttime is just harder for everybody, right? You're more anxious, you're more agitated. And when you're dying, it's more so like that. And so the caregiver is exhausted, and they love their volunteers. And because you're assigned to someone for months, in a lot of cases, you really get to know them.
What advice do you have for people who, you've got a friend and all of a sudden you hear they've got a terminal diagnosis? What to say to that person? What not to do? I think you say before that a lot of people like ignore it or will cut off contact with that person because it's so freaking uncomfortable to bring up such a touchy topic, and probably because part of it is you don't know what that other person's attitude toward death is. Do they want you to bring it up? Do they not want you to bring it up? Like, what's your advice on how to be compassionate toward people you care about that have a diagnosis?
Yeah, it is tricky because of all the landmines you just mentioned. I think in general, fewer words are better. I encourage people just to say, I'm here for you. Like, that's it. Then stop talking. Like, the worst is the platitudes. And I always say, if you feel better after saying something to someone, then it was probably the wrong thing to say. Like, well, he's in a better place, or at least he's not suffering anymore. All that stuff, that just makes you feel better. It does not make that other person feel better. I'm a big fan of hugs. So after Rob died, or when Rob was sick, I just loved it. If they were close enough to me, if they just hugged me and held me up, I would just fall into people's arms. So if you have that kind of relationship, be a good hugger. And a good hugger there's bad huggers too, right? You want to hold someone for as long as they want to be held. So let their body speak to your body, and don't be uptight. And if you're going to be uptight, don't do it. Okay. Because a bad hug is worse than no hug at all. But I think people always say, don't say, let me know what you need, because people don't really know what they need. So try ascertain what they like. Do they need help with the yard? And then say, can I come rake your yard be specific, 10 o'clock on Saturday? Can I come mow your lawn at 10 o'clock on Saturday? Or, can I take your kids? Don't take control. They've just lost control over everything. So don't you swoop in and take control. I had a client who's, friends were well-meaning, and while she was at an appointment, they came in and redid her whole sunroom. Like, they painted it and they got new furniture, and she was like, it just, even though I loved it, it felt like this violation of my privacy. So, ask permission. If you're at a funeral and you're in the receiving line, just say, I'm here for you. People would say, I'm sorry for your loss. And that always bugged me. I'm like, I wanted them to say, I'm sorry for our loss. Like, because we both lost this person, I'm sorry for your loss. Always made me feel kind of grumpy, but I know I'm unique in that I think that's normally a very good thing to say.
God, so I think just a hug and, hey, I'm here for you. That seems like pretty safe ground. I know we only have a few minutes left here. So one of my good friends is a doctor. And one of the huge benefits I've had of having a good friend who's a doctor is he's impressed upon me how much difference there is in skill level between doctors. Not all doctors are the same. And he says, there's doctors around that there's no way in hell he'd ever have them operate on his kids, for example, right? And the general public, they have no idea. They think, a doctor is a doctor. You call them doctor, they're all pretty much the same. You can trust everybody. That's not true. Is there a difference? I mean, obviously, I would imagine there is between like doulas and hospice volunteers or people who do hospice. Is there any way to make sure that the person, if you decide to hire a doula or someone else, is a good fit for what you're looking for?
Right. I think you're exactly right. A doula, just like anybody that you hire to do anything for you, whether it's a babysitter or a doctor or a roofer, right? You meet that person, you have some sense of what your needs might be. And then you interview them and you get a feel for them. And every doula I know will meet with you for free the first time, a kind of introductory thing. And just, go with someone who makes you feel calm, because that's really what you want. You want someone who can ground you. So if they make you feel anxious, no. I'm part of the Minnesota Death Collaborative. And we're a group of professionals around end of life. So it's doulas, but it's also home funeral celebrants or vigilists or spiritual directors, feng shui organizers, whatever. And we really aspire, when the demand for doulas is bigger, we really want to have a night where basically there's like 30 doulas and you can just go around interviewing, like speed dating with doulas. So you can find somebody that matches, that feels good.
Right. Is there a sort of question that maybe many families don't ask a doula before they hire one that might lead them to getting someone who is not a good fit for them?
Well, what's funny is nobody's looking for a doula because they don't know we exist. So, okay. So that's, basically any first meeting I have with people, I'm educating people about what I do. And it's sort of this smorgasbord of things that I could do, and then they select what works for them. So I think a lot of people would be going into that first interview having no idea what questions to ask or what they are looking for. So you kind of just got to go on your gut reaction of the person, like how you vibe with the person. And it's not really maybe about specifics or specific questions, because people don't really know what doulas do,
Right. And so how do you get your clients then? Is it all word of mouth?
Is all word of mouth, or?
It's word of mouth. I do podcasts. For some reason, I get a lot of publicity, which I think it's from it all stems from the TED Talk. So I do a lot of death education in the community. So people see me speaking about it, and then they encounter for themselves or a neighbor or friend, like, oh, you should call this person. So I would say it's 100% word of mouth.
And now you can actually, you're located in one location, but you can actually help family members be the doula for their family
across the country, basically.
If the support system is up for it. There's some people that I would just know it would never work because they're too anxious. They wouldn't be able to acquire those skills. But there's some people who just have a real intuitive feel for it.
Yeah. Well, Jane, listen, I think you are a godsend to everyone you help, and I just want to thank you for what you do. If people wanted to get more information about you or what your service is, where would they go?
DeathDoulaJane.com is my website. The Minnesota Death Collaborative.com is, if you're in this area, is great. And if you are in some other state, look and you're looking for a doula, go to NEDA, National End of Life Doula Alliance, NEDA. And they have a directory of doulas that is nationwide. And the Minnesota Death Collaborative started an end of life doula hotline, and it is going to go national in the middle of July. So look, it's a great, if you're going through this and you can't get a doula, so great to call the hotline to get ideas or support around individual crisis points. So that's great.
Awesome.
And I would also say the best book ever, I always say, why isn't there a book, What to Expect When You're Dying, like there is What to Expect When You're Expecting? So that book has now been written by B.J. Miller and Shoshana Erlanger or something. It's called...
it's okay. B.J. Miller on Amazon. I'm sure people could find the book.
Yeah, and he has an awesome... and my TED Talk and his TED Talk.
Yeah, so definitely check out your TED Talk, everybody. Also, and BJ Miller, he's that triple amputee that has the TED Talk, right?
Yeah, and he's amazing. Yeah, and his book is What Matters Most at the End.
Right. Awesome. Hey, Jane, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was great talking to you. You asked great questions.